No, sorry, 28b. 28b at the second Mishnah.
Okay.
Okay, so a guy finds something that's in the category of kol davar she'osav ha'ochel. This is something that it has earnings. It can do things. It's like an animal, for example.
Kol davar, Rabbi?
Kol davar, yeah.
Okay.
So yasav ha'ochel. So then he's allowed to use the item. The davar she'ein osav ha'ochel yimgar, and the item is not productive, then you can sell it and hold on to the money. Return it to him. See what you sort of how you can return it to him. So let's explain here. Is if you have a work animal, so the individual wants his work animal back. It takes time to train and to ingrain in a work animal to build a certain work habits. So if you find a work animal, the guy would rather his own work animal back than the money. He's already put in a lot of effort. Okay.
Are you starting from the Gomorrah or reading?
No, I'm the Mishnah. So v'hashivayisala means to return to him means return it to him in a way that he's going to be happy with the returned item. So in the case of an animal, keep the animal, and in the case of the animal where it's an inanimate object, then you can sell the object. What do you do with the money? So Tarfin says you can use the money. Therefore, if you lose it, you're obligated to pay. Because you're allowed to use it, you're responsible for its use. You're responsible for its use. So you're allowed to, let's say you find something, you find an expensive item with a simon. So, and after a certain amount of time, you don't find the owner. So what do? You sell the item, and you keep the money, and you write down somewhere in your files. There's some people even do it in their bavametzia Gemara. Yeah, this is an interesting thing like that. So you can write it in the front page, just write down all the lowest objects, what it was valued at. You sell it, and you can do whatever you want with the money.
With the intention that you might need to give it back.
Yeah.
The person shows up.
Correct. Obviously, you have to write down whatever the simonim are. You have to write it down as well. Okay. Because you're allowed to use it, you're also responsible if the money was lost. However, Rekiva says, you shouldn't use it. And therefore, if you use it, therefore, if you lost it, then you do not need to repay the money. You need not be concerned. So you keep the pile of money in your bavametzia Gemara, and if somebody steals it, so be it. But you can't actually use it. You can't take it as a loan. So the Gemara says that you have a work animal, you have to keep the work animal. So the Gemara says ulu ilam forever, or for 12 months. Okay, and then we'll give some more specific definitions here. Tanya Namihachi, the Bryce says as well. If you have an ox or a donkey, cow or a donkey, you keep them for 12 months. Evaluate them, and you can sell them and keep the money. If you have a golem, these are calves. Siyachin is young donkey. Thank you. You keep them for 3 months. You can evaluate them and keep keep a record of it. You don't have to actually keep the animal. If you have birds, avozim or geese, tiny golem or chickens, 30 days, after that you can evaluate them, keep the money, and sell them. Keep the money meaning return the money instead. Obviously, you can't keep the money, but you can return the money instead of the animal, instead of the chicken. A bird, what do you call this? A chicken. So previously we were talking about a rooster. I misspoke. I meant to say birds. It's a rooster, and now we're talking about a chicken. So a chicken that lays eggs, it's like a large animal. You keep it for a month. Tanya Nami Hachi, there's another Bryce that says similarly. Tanya Golas Ubehem Agasim, Tapan Shemas Chodesh, a chicken or a large animal, you keep them for 12 months. You can keep them until you sell them and keep the money. If you have calves or baby donkeys, you keep them for 30 days. After that, you evaluate the money. Now, this contradicts the previous brisa. Previous brisa says 3 months, and now we're giving them 30 days. Similarly, avozim v'tarnagolim. This is geese or roosters. The called over shetipula or any animal like a pet, which the productive output is far less than the required inputs. Or it's not a work animal. It doesn't produce anything for you. Metaban shlesh yamim. And we put geese and roosters in that category. Taban shlesh yamim, keep them for 3 days. You can evaluate it and keep the money. The Gemara's contradiction. You have a contradiction between baby donkeys and calves, between the two brises. One brisa says 3 months, the other brisa says 30 days. And similarly, geese and roosters, one brisa says 30 days, the other brisa says 3 days. The Gemara says, difficulty between baby calves and between calves and baby donkeys in the two brises is not difficult. Depends. If it's the time of year and the type of location that has pasture available, at minimal cost, so then you can keep it for longer because the pasture is available. But if you have to start buying feeds, so then you can't rely on it, and you're not obligated to sort of feed the animal indefinitely, 30 days, and then sell it off. The same thing is true with the geese and the roosters. If they're large birds, they eat a lot, then you have to buy a lot of food. So therefore, the rabbi said 3 days. If they're small birds, however, they don't eat as much, then you can keep them for 30 days. If the animal is not productive,
What about emotional support animals?
I'm not sure the validity of the concept.
They eat a lot.
What about the animal in your possession needs an emotional support animal or an emotional support human? How do you figure that into the equation? Just a Portland fella.
Great question.
Yeah, I think Yomi asked if an emotional support animal requires an emotional support animal.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
3 days.
Okay. So hey, so what should you do here? 1 second. Okay, if a guy finds multiple animals, right? So he should evaluate them separately, and he should give the value of each. This is according to an amended Gerson Rashi. He should, instead of returning one animal, he should return the value of 2 animals, not one better animal. So that's if you find 2 small animals, you think, well, we'll get them evaluated, we'll find out what the value of the large animal is, that's equal to 2. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to give them back 2 animals. That is one version. There is another version of the Gemara that sort of thing. Is that the article interprets the Gemara?
One found a group. If one found a group of 10 young donkeys, he should not sell one of them and use the proceeds to pay for feeding the others, because he has the obligation of returning each and every one.
Okay, so they interpret. Okay, so they have the other interpretation. This interpretation relies on egel agola means 1 for 2. So the interpretation is don't put the value down of 1 when you found 2. And your version is that you shouldn't take one of a group to feed the rest of them. Either sell the whole thing or keep the whole thing. Okay. What do you do with the money? Or Tarfin says you can use the money. Okay, so the implication here is that Reb Tarfin is saying if you use it, in other words, you found a Rolex. You hung up the signs for a year. It's done. Nobody's coming to get it. You're not interested in the Rolex. You don't want to hold it around. You want to sell it, and you'll write it. You'll write down the simonim. You'll keep a record of it, and according to Tarfin, you can use the money. If you use the money, then you're responsible for it. If you don't use the money, or moreover, if you haven't yet used the money, then you'd be exempt. When you use it, but if you haven't yet used it, you'd be exempt. This seems to be a very difficult question on Rav Yosef. We learned. Shomer Aveda, a guy who's watching a lost object. Rabbi Omer Kashem Sachar, Rav Yosef Omer I'm sorry, Rabbi Omer Kashem Rav Yosef Omer Kashem Sachar. We saw this Gemara previously in Kamma. The logic of Rav is very simple here. If a guy finds a lost object, he's nothing but a shemer chinam, an unpaid watchman with the least amount of liability, simply because, I don't know, he never really accepted anything more significant. Rav Yosef is a very novel idea. His idea is like this. Returning a lost object is a mitzvah. And the general rule is that oitzik b'mitzvah poter min mitzvah. What does that mean? Let's say a guy's busy preparing his Canva artwork to hang up a sign that he found some lost object. And at that very moment, there's a phone call in some charity organization, or there's a poor person at the door, and they're knocking, they on charity. The law is that oitzik b'mitzvah poter min mitzvah. Because you're in the middle of one mitzvah, then you do not have to fulfill the other mitzvah. So now you don't have to give your charity. There's no obligation to give charity if you're busy returning the lost object. So Yosef says, because of that, we consider you a shomer sachar. It's as if you're getting some amount of benefit from having a lost object to watch. You can exempt yourself from certain mitzvahs. So therefore, you're like a paid watchman, and you have significantly more liability. Now the problem here is the Mishnah seems to imply that if you haven't yet used the money, you have no liability whatsoever, both according to Rabbi Kiva and according to Rabbi Tarfon. Even if you're allowed to use the money, if you use the money, then you'd be liable as a borrower.
So if you just kept this pile of money somewhere, you're
exactly.
liable.
Even Rabbi Tarfon would agree that you're not liable. But then if that's the case, then nobody is like the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says you have a liability even before you use the item. So Rabbi Yosef will explain. Everyone, in other words, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva are not even, when they talk about chayav and potter, they're not talking about lost or stolen. Lost or stolen is the difference between a shomer chinam and a shomer sachar. An unpaid watchman is exempt if the item is lost or stolen. He's basically only liable for gross negligence. However, a shomer sachar, paid watchman, is liable for negligence, even minor forms of negligence, and that would include lost or stolen. Okay, so in other words, so this is according to Yosef's opinion. The Mishnah obviously would say that you're liable on lost or stolen. So what is the beit? Ki pligi ba'einsin the shayl. Okay, we're talking about the einus of a shayl. Let's explain this. So remember, we spoke about this. There's in terms of liability, there's 3 watchmen. There's really 4. We have a shemer chinam and a shemer sachar. We spoke about that, right? Shemer chinam is liable only for gross negligence. Shemer sachar is liable even for minor negligence. So we call that you're liable for lost or stolen. What's he not liable for? Things beyond his control, right? For example, armed robbers. Armed robbers are something that are beyond your control. Maybe a sudden fire would be out of your control. All sorts of things. That category is beyond your control. In Hebrew, we call that einus. Einus means, beyond any. The guy could have done the best job in the world. Bad stuff happens, and this was just one of them. It's too bad. However, a shayl, a borrower, does have to pay for einus. If you borrow something, you're completely responsible, even for things that are beyond your control. And obviously, the reason for that is because you're sort of standing in place of the original owner. So you have to give back what you returned, and it's not your fault. But by taking ownership, then that's quite literally what you did, right? I'll give back now. Make him whole. That's the responsibility of a shayl. Unlike a shemer chinam that never takes ownership. All it says is, I'm going to do a certain job for you. It's a commitment to a job. It's not a commitment to the item itself. So he's not obligated to make the owner whole if he did his job correctly and everything worked out well. Together?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about here the responsibility of what happened. When the Mishnah refers to is whether you're liable or not, it refers to einus, something that is beyond your control of a shayl of a borrower. Tarfin says, Tarfin says because he has a right to use it, he's considered a borrower and he has full responsibility. Rabbi Kiva says, the rabbis did not permit you to use it, and therefore you're not a borrower. So Gemara says, 1 second, if you're not a borrower, then obviously you're exempt. What's the lefichach? What exactly is the lefichach of Rabbi Kiva? Let's explain. Let's say the debate of Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon is talking about lost or stolen. And the debate is whether you're a paid watchman or an unpaid watchman. Okay, don't use it. Therefore, if you use it, if you lost it, you're not liable. Meaning, I would think that because you're allowed to watch, you're considered a paid watch. Because you're allowed to benefit from it, you're considered a paid watchman. So therefore, Rabbi Kiva says, therefore, no, because you're not allowed to watch it, therefore you're not a paid watchman. You're an unpaid watchman. Therefore, in the case of liability only for lost or stolen, there is no liability. In other words,
You can't watch it. You can't.
in other words, Rabbi Kiva is saying is as follows. Rabbi Tarfon is trying to give expanded liability. Tarfon, you don't have expanded liability, only minimal liability. Therefore, you're exempt. And again, in this context here, expanded means lost or stolen, and limited liability means gross negligence. So Rabbi Kiva said, Rabbi Tarfon says you have expanded liability. Says Rabbi Kiva, because you can't use it, therefore you have minimal liability. No, basically gross negligence and nothing else.
Can't use it or you don't use it?
You can't use it according to Rabbi Kiva.
Like
Prohibited. Prohibited to be used. Okay. However, if you'll say, okay, so in other words, the good way to think of it is there's a spectrum of liability, right? There's 3 entries. So you have gross negligence, minor negligence, and beyond your control.
Okay.
So right, there's a spectrum. So Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Tarfon puts you in the middle of the spectrum. Rabbi Kiva backs you up. He says, no, you're only gross negligence. Therefore, you're exempt from everything else. However, according to Rav Yosef, we're pushing to the opposite end of the spectrum. Now we're at maximal liability according to Tarfon. Effectively, what Rabbi Kiva is saying is no. That's all he needs to say.
But you can't use the money.
There's no.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, according to Rabbi Kiva is
Yeah.
saying you can't use the money. There's no need to say therefore.
Right.
Because there's no extension. There's no
Right.
beyond your control is the maximum liability. There is no further point. So why does it need to specify a leficha? Therefore, if you're saying you can't use it, so then you're not in the category of shayal. You don't have the most maximal end of the spectrum. You're somewhere in the middle, according to Yosef. There's no need to specify leficha. Therefore, we're together.
Yes.
Okay, so my leficha of Tarfon. So the Gemara says hachim b'alei lemisna. Rabbi Kiva, I'm Rabbi Kiva says you can't use it, but I know you din and I know live shayal. You're not a borrower if you can't use it. And therefore you don't have full liability, meaning even for things that are beyond your control. So why did Rabbi Kiva have to say lefichach? So the Gemara says, according to Yosef, you're right, he didn't. Because Tarfon gave a lefichach, because Tarfon says therefore Rabbi Kiva used the same terminology, but it's true the matter is it wasn't necessary. It's obvious. Yes. 2 lines from the bottom of the page, 29a. Well, the Rabbi Tarfon, the first word is on the line, lamali. Why does Tarfon specify quote unquote therefore? So the Gemara says, Kamma. Okay, therefore Tarfon is very interesting. It says because the rabbi said you're allowed to use it, therefore you're liable even if you didn't use it. Because you're considered a borrower. Because you're allowed to use it, you are a borrower. And therefore you're liable even without using it. And you have full liability even for things beyond your control.
This is finding any item.
What was that?
This is upon finding any item.
No, upon selling the item.
If it's just inanimate object?
Yeah.
Or,
When anything that would be sold,
okay,
yes, in this category.
that's strange, you can't use it, so it just sits there.
Okay, so that helps. So
Rabbi Dovid was saying you can't,
Yeah,
it just sits there.
the money just sits there.
29B,
What
next
if it's
row.
what if it's an animal, you can't use it, it just.
So, well, animals, so
you have the
you have
other
the
rules.
certain amount of time, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
The other rules.
So last three words before 29A. So Gemara says
29B.
29B. I'm sorry. Yeah. V'ha'avdu katani. The last three words. V'ha'avdu katani. The Mishnah specifically does not talk about Inus. The Mishnah says im avdu, it was lost. Inus is beyond your control. Avdu, lost, is considered minor negligence. So Gemara says kidarabba. Avdu doesn't mean lost. It means like Rabba said. Amar Rabba nignivu b'listim. So avdu shetavas finas b'yam. Stolen means lost or stolen doesn't mean the typical lost or stolen. These things are negligible offenses. I'm sorry, negligent offenses. These are negligent offenses. These are things that you could have changed. You could have made sure the item wasn't lost or stolen. However, Rabba says that sometimes the word lost or stolen refers to things that are beyond your control. For example, armed robbers, which is considered inus, and also avdu, lost means shetavas finas b'yam, the boat sank. That is also a form of totally beyond your control of inus. So the Mishnah could be fit with Rabbi Yosef's interpretation of referring to inus as well. Amar Yehudah, Amar Shmuel, halacha Reb Tarfon. The halacha follows the opinion of Reb Tarfon. Bei rachva havle hanu zuzi diasmi. The people of Rachva, they had the money of these orphans. Aslak Rav Yosef. They went in front of Rav Yosef. Amalei, they said to him, can we use the money of the orphans until they grow up? So he says to them, Rav Yosef says to them, halacha follows Rav Tarfon, that you're allowed to use the items of the money of a lost item, and therefore you should be able to use the money of the orphans. Abaya says, okay, this is the fundamental distinction which we haven't really mentioned. We mentioned the first part. This we said the law of Reb Tarfon is only true. Reb Tarfon says you're allowed to use it. You're allowed to use the money. Like we said, it's only the money, right? Meaning that the that you sold the lost item and you got money for it. So you have money for the lost item. You're allowed to use that money because you put the effort in to sell it. So then we say you're allowed to use the money. But if, on the other hand, you find money with a simon, then you're not allowed to use the money. And Abaye was saying that the money of the orphans was effectively in that latter category. And because it's like money that was found, therefore it should be prohibited to use the money. And so Rav Yosef says to them, Amar Zil, you can leave. Lo yishaf kli da'ashrulach. Abaye is not letting me permit this for you.
I have another question.
Sure.
When the ship sank, it depended whether you're defined as a borrower or not a borrower.
So ship sinking is considered inus. It's beyond your control. So if the only one who pays for anything beyond their control is a borrower.
Okay.
Because a borrower takes ownership. Metaphorically, that metaphoric term is to be taken literally. When you take ownership of it, that means you got to make the person whole. And it's not about whether or not you're responsible. A shaver is a job.
Okay.
Even a leaser, a lessee, it's a job with a responsibility. If you're not responsible, then you're exempt. But a borrower is not a job with a responsibility. A borrower stands in place of the owner. You stand in place of the owner. Well, just if the owner's ship sunk, then he loses it. Then if your ship sunk, so you have to make him whole.
Sure.
Okay. Interesting Gemara here. Let's start. Matzah Svarim. A guy finds Svarim, Sefer Torah, books, and these books are things that were, even if they're not Sefer Torah, but they were written like a Sefer Torah in the sense that they were a long scroll that was rolled up. Okay, you read it once every 30 days. If you don't know how to read, you roll it. And this is important so that it doesn't just sit in position. But you should not learn something for the first time from the scroll. Okay, the idea is as follows. Let's say a guy is familiar with the Chumash, right? So when he scrolls through it and he reads much faster. If he's learning something for the first time, then he has to open the scroll for longer. And he's not supposed to be using the scroll for his own personal benefit. So we don't allow him to learn anything from the scroll that he hasn't already learned. That's sort of, if he's already learned it, it's sort of the normal part of rolling it. He's just taking a quick glance.
Right.
But if he's learning for the first time, it takes longer. We don't allow that. Similarly,
Why would it matter? It takes longer.
so I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you.
Right.
I will also say that the cloth that we use today is a relatively modern invention. If you look at the shul's older Sefer Torah, that's the way cloth was written for much longer amounts of time. Again, you need very precise metallurgy equipment to make modern cloth. It's a very precise science. But older cloth, which again, like you said, is the way cloth was made for. Aside from supposedly say, I don't know if this is true or not, they say it's like writing with a pen on tiles, on older cloth. That's how difficult it was. I don't know if that's true. I have no clue. Obviously, we have plenty of older Sefer Torah. But apparently it's not good. You have to roll it constantly. Otherwise it stays in position. I don't know what it happens. It cracks maybe, I'm not sure. It's not good for the item. The item has to be moved around. Okay. It's true of all books that were written the same style.
It's like a muscle.
And apparently if it's open for too long, that's also not too good. I'm not sure if that's because there's a risk to the item itself, or there's concern like the guy will bring a cup of coffee and and velour and water don't get along very well. Okay. Obviously, they didn't have coffee then. Okay, so he had beer. Okay, you find clothing, same idea. You sort of shake it out once every 30 days. And you sort of spread it out. You iron it, whatever, for so that it should last longer. But he can't use it. Can't do it for himself. Meaning, if he wants to have a nice shirt, hanging on the wall or something like that, you can't iron the shirt just for your own purposes. Similarly, if you have silver or copper vessels. You can use them as much as they need to be used, but not to wear them out. This probably has something to do with the fact that these things tarnish very quickly. The copper unbelievably quickly, and silver also relatively quickly. And but if you have gold or glass material, so gold carries its luster, right? And it doesn't tarnish. Or silver items, you don't have to touch them until it comes, and he'll tell you who to give it to. You find something that's below your dignity to pick up, you're not obligated to pick up. And we'll explain that probably tomorrow. Amar Shmuel, if a guy finds tefillin in the marketplace, what do? Evaluate it, sell it, keep the money, write down the siman in your book, the front page of your Gemara. Matzah Ravina. So Ravina says, what do you mean? What about the Mishnah? The Mishnah says, Matzah Svarim, you find the Sefer Torah, Karban Echad L'Shlashim Yom, many day liquors, Golan in some Demayim Menichan Loi. Basically, you have to take responsibility for keeping the scroll in good shape, in good health.
Page again. Page Mishnah again.
29b, first one line is Golan, 2 lines below the Gemara, the Mishnah. So in other words, you roll it, but you can't evaluate it and sell it. You tell the guy, keep on rolling this for 10 years every month. And why? Why don't you sell it and keep the money? Why can't you do that? So Rabbi says, this is the reality, that you can go to the store and buy a set of tefillin. You can't go to the store and buy a Sefer Torah. It just doesn't exist. Nobody sort of writes Sefer Torah when they don't have a buyer present. Everything is, it's a quote to order. So therefore, you have to keep the item because you can't just sell it off and give the guy money because the money is not necessarily going to buy a new one. The rabbis taught, somebody borrows a scroll from his friend, you should not lend it to somebody else. Okay, we're going to go through all the steps of this price. So if you don't understand something, we'll hopefully get through all of these today still. Okay, it's Paischa v'Karabay. You can read it. So you can't lend to somebody else. Paischa v'Karabay. You can read it. But you can't learn initially. You can't learn something for the first time. You cannot read with somebody else. We'll have to explain why. So two people can't read the scroll at once. Somebody who gives a friend a Sefer Torah to watch. He rolls it every 12 months, which is not like the Mishnah, by the way. The Mishnah says you roll every 30 days. We'll talk about it. You open it and read it. You can open it to read from it, but you can't open it for your own purposes. We'll have to explain what that means. Simcha says, in a new scroll, in a new scroll, 30 days, in an old scroll, once every 12 months. It's a flat 12 months. That seems to be like the first opinion, which also says once every 12 months. Okay, let's explain this. Amar, we learned in the Mishnah in the Brisa. You shouldn't lend it to somebody else. The Gemara says, "My area said Torah. Why specifically a Torah scroll? I feel call milinami." The truth of the matter is that everything, if you're a borrower, you're not supposed to lend it to somebody else. A borrower should not loan out the stuff he borrowed. The Amar Shimon Lakish says, "Kanshana Rabbi." Here is Rabbi taught, "Ein hashel r'shar lahashel." A borrower cannot lend out the item he borrowed. And similarly, the ein haseker r'shar lahasker. Right? You can't rent out an apartment that you've rented or any other item. Or any other type of lease. So the Gemara says Sefer Torah it's shrichale. The idea here is that a Sefer Torah is different. Ma'otem, I would think nichalei l'inish that avid mitzvah b'mayne. Sefer Torah you do a mitzvah with, you read it, you do a mitzvah. So therefore, maybe the guy wants it. Kamash Malan, that no, he doesn't want it. He only authorizes the borrower. He cannot borrow it out, lend it out to somebody else. Okay, the Korah and you read it. Shita, obviously, ve'lamai shailamine. What do you think he borrowed it for? Just to show off? Obviously, he's going to read it. So Gemara says safe it's strictly. That's really the next point. You can read from it, but not learn initially. If you borrow a Sefer Torah for quick reading, it's not to learn from the Sefer Torah. This is a guy who entrusts it, meaning he hires a watchman. So Gemara says why exactly is he opening the scroll? We said he can roll it once every 12 months. Why is he opening it? You telling me he could? You're telling me that if he opens it for himself, it's prohibited. But you just said that he should open and close it. This is what we mean to say. If while he's rolling it once every 12 months, he reads from it, that's permitted. But if he decides for his own benefit to open, read it, and roll it, also that's prohibited. Simcha says a new scroll every 30 days, and an old scroll every 12 months. He says both types of scrolls, it's once every 12 months. So Gemara says Kamma. The first unnamed author is the same as Rabbi Dovid Yehudah. They both said 12 months. They both said roll the scroll every 12 months. It's the same thing. So Gemara says you're right. There's a mistake in the Brisa. That both a new and an old scroll, you roll 30 days. So we have the first unnamed opinion is 12 months. Was it? Sumcha says if it's new 30 days, if it's old 12 months. Rabbi Yaakov says no, it's always 30 days. And the Mishnah is probably like Rabbi Yaakov, which also our Mishnah also says once every 30 days.
That mean end to end every 30 days?
I'm sorry?
Does that mean rolling it end to end every 30 days?
Rolling
it a little bit.
I presume, I presume probably the latter. You roll it a little bit. You can't learn initially from it, and nor could somebody else read with you. So Gemara says, "V'raminu." I'll ask you a question. One second. Layikra parsha, you shouldn't read a full parsha, v'yishna, and read it twice. Layikra by parsha, v'yitargim, you shouldn't read a parsha and translate. V'yiftach by yosim v'gimel dafin. You shouldn't open the scroll for more than three columns. Layikra by shleshim b'nei adam b'krach echad, and 3 people shouldn't read from one volume. So the Gemara says, what's the implication here of this brisa? Hashnayim kairin, but 2 people could read from an open scroll. And the question is, the mission of the Brisa both said 2 people shouldn't read from an open scroll. And this Bryce says only 3 people shouldn't read. Presumably 2 people could read.
Mhm.
So the Gemara says, the idea is as follows. If they're both reading from the same place, then each guy sort of pulls the scroll toward him. So it can rip the scroll. But if, remember, you can't open more than 3 columns. If each of them is reading a different column, so there's enough space for them. So they're not going to be pulling from each other, and then it's permitted. 2 people. 3 people, however, would not be permitted under any circumstances. Okay. Motziksus, he finds clothes. You shake it out once every 30 days. So the Gemara says, remember, are you implying here, Denior Malilo, that shaking it out is a good thing for the clothes? Right, you're being told that you have to sort of shake, dust it out every 30 days. Rav Yechon says, if a guy has a professional tailor at home, so what should he do? He should dust out his clothing every day. In other words, if the guy has a tailor on staff, and this is a behavior you can engage in. The implication here is that this is not a wise behavior, because by dusting out your clothing constantly causes them to rip. So if you have a tailor on staff, then you can do it. Otherwise, you shouldn't do it. So no, there's a difference here. Every single day, kashilo, that's bad for it. But if it's every 30 days to take off the dust, malila, that's overall good. You buy same. Another possibility is like kasha habachad habetray. One person shaking it out doesn't have enough energy to sort of rip it. When 2 people shake it out, that's prohibited because then then it's much closer to being ripped. You buy same. Another possibility is like kasha habiyada habachotra. With a hand, with shaking it by hand, that's not going to rip it. Shaking it with a stick, that will rip it, you shouldn't do it. Ibai Sema, another possibility is like kasha, habad imra, habad kisna. If it's made out of wool, it's much more likely to rip. If it's made out of flax, it's much less likely to rip. Rav Yechon says, Kisa de Charoshan, better to drink a cup filled with sorcery, Kisa de Paishran than drinking a cup of lukewarm water.
Sorcery.
Okay, explanation on that one.
The explanation is very simple.
Prepared by sorcerers.
A cup of lukewarm water, Talmud here is considering to be very unhealthy, like really unhealthy.
Oh, really?
Such that it's less risky to drink a cup of that sorcerer is prepared for you than drinking a cup of lukewarm water.
Rabbi, the absence of coffee in the morning.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Just hang on for a second. Don't stop your drink. Just let's finish it. Okay. This is only true if you have a metal cup. You write that? Is that right? What do you have? A mug, right? You have an earthenware vessel. This rule doesn't apply. If you have a metal vessel, if you didn't pour it in boiling, but if you did, it was boiling, there's no concern. Tzivya is an inclusion. The inclusion is anything. It could be a spice, it could be sugar or honey or coffee, whatever it is. It means something that's included in the beverage. So it's not just water now. It's beverage plus something. But if you throw in something else, then it is not a concern. Okay. Let's just continue. The next one is a part of the Gemara. Continuing in the same subject. If a guy is extreme trust fund baby, he's very wealthy. He wants to waste his money. What should he do? He should wear flax clothing. He should use glass stuff. Just hang on with the questions because we'll explain in a moment. He should hire workers and not oversee them. Let's explain. He should wear flax. What does this mean? Bekisna ramisa, in Roman flax, because apparently it's very delicate. Use glass vessels. A very delicate type of white glass. So it's not obviously not tempered or the glass we have today. What this means is you're hiring workers to work in the fields where they can easily trample the vines and you don't watch them. They don't care about your stuff. They're workers. They're paid by the hour. You don't supervise them.